Hey guys, welcome back to another video, or welcome if you are new. My name is Ebony, I'm a naturopathic nutritionist, and today I'm going to be answering the question, why do I get bloated after eating? This is such a common complaint that I see in my practice, so I have so much to say on this topic, and I'm also going to inject some tips in this video as I go as well, so I really hope that it's helpful. With today's question, we're specifically looking at bloating after eating. So the first place we're going to talk about is digestion, because weak digestion is without a doubt one of the most common issues I see with this complaint. When it comes to digestion, my brain is like this, because I'm like, there's so much to say on this alone. Now, things that are going to contribute to weak digestion is definitely things like not chewing your food properly. I know that's very basic to say, but honestly, so many of us actually aren't chewing our food properly, particularly because in the world that we live in, a lot of people are actually kind of very go, 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 or we are very distracted. So we also live in a world where we have so much tech. Do you know what I mean? We've got TVs and phones, etc. And when a lot of people sit down to eat, they're focused on anything but their meal, right? And we don't realise, sometimes it takes just someone just to remind you, just to say, that's not doing you any favours. It's definitely not. The gut-brain connection is wildly strong, okay? So to throw a little fact in there for you, there is more neurons in your intestines than there is in your spinal cord, okay? That's like a mic drop for that, right? There is no denying that when we sit down to eat, these things that, are distracting us, or, we're doing with our nervous system, if we're stressed, if we're go, 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 eating on the go, etc., this all plays a role. So that's just a first little reminder to pay attention to these things. Sit down, focus on your meal, try and be without distractions, try and make sure you do sit when you eat your meal as well, like really be intentional about it, and also try and slow down so you're not rushing your food down, okay? These are basic things, but they can make a huge difference. Now, moving more internally, some other elements that are definitely going to weaken the digestion is if what we call, or what I call, the triangle of digestion essentially is defected. So I imagine this little triangle in my head when it comes to digestion. I've got stomach acid, digestive enzymes, and the bile flow from the gallbladder and the liver, okay? And these three things all need to be in tip-top condition, okay? If one of those points of the triangle is not working properly, bloating can definitely be an outcome of that. So when I'm working with a client, I'm always making sure that these three things were like tick, 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 particularly in their support. Now, from a clinical perspective, what are things that might tell me maybe that someone might have some defects in these areas? Let's start off with stomach acid. Definitely symptoms like acid reflux can be common. A lot of people think that acid reflux is high stomach acid, but actually in majority of cases it's low stomach acid. So that definitely is something to look out for. Another one would also be if someone's had a big diet change and they've gone from having not much high protein, like let's say animal products, like they're on a vegan or vegetarian diet, for example, so they're not having animal products, they're suddenly having meat in their diet, which is very, high protein product. Basically, stomach acid, one of the roles of it is to break down protein. And another thing also to know about it is it's not a muscle, but it acts a bit like a muscle in the sense of if you don't use it, you lose it kind of vibe, okay? So if someone has had a diet change going from, let's say, vegetarian, vegan to suddenly eating meats, this is something that I'm thinking about, because depending on how long they've been on that vegan, vegetarian diet, their stomach acid actually potentially has declined. It's very common to see in those diets. In fact, most vegan and vegetarians I work with tend to have low stomach acid. So that's definitely something that I'm thinking about here. And then that's also why, when they do have the diet switch, suddenly they're getting all these digestive complaints, and it's more so from the perspective of their body just doesn't have the tools and the juices to be really breaking back down, do you know what I mean, these higher protein sources. And also similarly on that note, actually, so it doesn't even have to be a diet change, maybe someone just generally does have a low protein diet, that can also be a cause, again, because if you haven't got much protein going in your diet, then again, your stomach acid's not going to be, exercised as much as we would like it to. Another one as well, just to also throw in, is when people live off smoothies. If you're drinking a lot of smoothies all the time, you're relying on them, as breakfast every day, that's all pre-digested, so you don't need much stomach acid and digestive enzymes, all these things to actually break that down, because it's all pre-blended for you. So we do want to make sure that with our food choices we make, we are choosing things that are going to exercise these functions, okay? I'm going to give you some tips and some things to add to your plate that's going to really help exercise those in just a second. Okay, so that's stomach acid. Digestive enzyme, if I'm going to be really honest with you, it's not really like there's a specific symptom that links to that. It's more so just general like bloating and like digestive discomfort, etc. So that's more so something that I assess with people, particularly through testing. But again, the tips I'm going to share address that anyway. And then when it comes to the bile flow, so bile helps to break down our fats and absorb our fats. So a very key clinical symptom I look out for is definitely if they've got floating stools. So definitely pay attention to your bowel movements, because your bowels can tell you a lot about your health. If your stool is floating on the water, that means there's a higher content of fat, okay? And that's going to tell me you're not breaking down your fats properly and absorbing them properly as well. So that's when we start to think about the bile, okay? So that's definitely something to look out for. And another really big one is if someone just struggles with fatty foods. You know, they struggle like in the sense of, they're like, every time I eat fatty foods, I just feel lethargic, I feel heavy, I just don't feel great, right? That's another thing that I might be looking out for. So there's just a few little things to throw in there, yeah, from a clinical perspective. Now let's jump into some little quick tips just to really help with all three. And I'm going to give you my favorite tip, and that is add bitters, okay? Bitter greens into all of your meals. They are incredibly powerful, and the great thing about bitters is they work on your stomach acid, they work on your bile flow, and they work on your digestive enzymes, okay? So when I say bitters, I'm talking about things like watercress, rocket, if you're American, arugula. Those are my two favorite, okay? So if you can go to the supermarket, just grab a packet of those and get into the habit that with every meal you should take a small handful. Ideally, chew on a handful. Honestly, I know it's not the most pleasant thing in the world. I mean, some people love it. But if you can chew on a mouthful of bitters before you eat your meal, amazing. That's such a great way to help stimulate these functions, because that bitter taste is what stimulates that stomach acid and the bile, you know, in all the digestive secretions basically. So that is definitely my top tip for these three things. Get more bitter foods into your meals, and ideally start your meal with the bitters. If you want to take it a step further, you can get like, you know, bitter sprays and bitter drops and tinctures that you can also utilize, but you can do this stuff for your food, guys. So yeah, try and just really get the bitter herbs in and see how that makes you feel. Okay, the next place that we're going to go to is that good old microbiome, because bloating definitely can be a result of an imbalance within our microbiome. Now, when it comes to our microbiome, so this is where we're looking at the bacteria, okay, inside our gut. So from a very basic understanding, you may have heard that we have good bacteria and bad bacteria, and the general recommendation online is take a probiotic and you're supporting your gut and you're going to be great. The unfortunate reality to that is a probiotic is not the answer to everything and everyone. Actually, in some cases, probiotics could really make your bloating worse, particularly if the bacteria has actually migrated into your small intestine. So this is another thing to mention about bloating. A question that I would definitely ask, like let's say if you were sitting in front of me as my client, is I would want to know how quickly does that bloating happen? Does the bloating happen instantly to the point where it's like I haven't even finished my meal yet and I'm already bloated? Or is there a bit of a delay on it? Like, is it like I eat my meal and then I'm bloated like an hour or like 30 minutes to an hour later, for example? That question can also tell us a lot, because if you are bloating like instantly, and also we're ruling out the fact of it's not like a food allergy or intolerance and that type of thing, then we definitely might be thinking more so about your small intestine, and that's where we look at something called SIBO, okay? So small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. SIBO is where the bacteria is basically just staying in the wrong part of the intestine. So when it comes to our intestines, 98% of your bacteria should be in your large intestine and only 2% should be in your small intestine. However, due to, multiple reasons, there can be someone's bacteria may, stay more so in the small intestine, or maybe even migrate up. So yes, from a symptom perspective, one of the top symptoms of SIBO is bloating, particularly because the bacteria present with SIBO tend to also produce a lot of gas. So you might also notice you not only have bloating, but you might also notice some gas as well, like burping or even flatulence down the other end. There is testing that you can get to see if you have SIBO. However, I will just say if I was working with someone, I personally always start with a GI map, because it's a bit more root cause, because when it comes to SIBO again is not a root cause condition. If someone has SIBO, you have to go even deeper than that. You've got to be thinking, well, why? Like, why is the environment inside this person's digestive system them contributed and created, you know, this SIBO. So I always start with the GI map, because there's also a lot of patterns, particularly if you know, you have someone interpreting who knows, you know, what they're looking at. There's a lot of things that I can get from a GI map that can tell me if SIBO is a, you know, possibility. I can't really remember kind of where I lost my tangent there talking about SIBO, but I know I mentioned about, you know, people just taking probiotics, and just going back to that, yeah, it really is not the answer for everyone, because actually, you know, some people, for example, the strains in the probiotic, actually they might be high in that, you know, and it's another issue. Maybe they're lacking in a different type of bacteria, or maybe there's an overgrowth of unwanted bacteria, and actually taking a probiotic may not really be much help there. Maybe we need to go in from a different perspective, and we need things that are actually going to help reduce and kill off that unwanted bacteria. So there's a lot more to the gut microbiome than just take a probiotic. So yeah, honestly, I just think that's actually one of the most like worst pieces of advice on the internet. Is like, just take a probiotic and you're going to be fine. It's not going to be the case for everyone. And then also on the GI map, some other things that get tested is also yeast and fungi. So we can also see if is there maybe a overgrowth of yeast, like candida, for example. That could be another really common contributor to bloating, particularly if you notice that you always bloat after eating sugar or like high like carbohydrate meals. This might be something we want to think about. Of course, we want to pay attention to other symptoms as well. Like, for example, if I'm looking at someone who I might think maybe does have a yeast overgrowth, I want to know, do they get itchy on their skin? Does their scalp itch? Do they have any symptoms like thrush, you know, recurringly, or maybe even like oral thrush as well, like white coating maybe even on their tongue? Yeah, there's lots of questions I also want to dive in other areas, but yeah, it could be a potential when it comes to bloating, particularly after eating, right? The other massive pro with the GI map as well is they also have what we call the intestinal health marker section. So actually through the GI map, we can see what is your level of digestive enzymes. Is there fat, you know, in the stool? There's all of these other pieces of information that we can get from it that just looks at the whole digestive tract essentially. So definitely I really do recommend to anyone, if you suffer with any digestive related symptoms, getting a GI map will never ever be a waste of money. Every system in the body goes back to your gut. So I think generally, even if you don't have symptoms, it's a very good test to do. If you can do it annually. If not, maybe every like 2 years or so. It's a great test to check in on, because like I said, everything in your body goes back to it. But particularly if you have symptoms, don't sleep on it. Before I go on to my next one, another little thing has just come to my mind as well, which I forgot to also say in the digestion section. Another really big contributor to like issues with digestion is people having too many liquids with their meal as well. So also be mindful of that. If you are in the habit that you'll drink, like for example, your water or whatever it is at mealtime, particularly if you forget during the day and you're like, gets to mealtime, you're like, oh, I need to drink some water, let's get it down. Not the best thing to be doing, okay? Because the liquids are actually going to dilute those digestive secretions. So ideally you want to keep liquids to a minimum with mealtime, and try and keep like your fluid intake to like between meals, okay? So that's just another little tip as well to think about. Okay, the next thing I want to touch on is definitely that stress element. So I briefly touched on it earlier with that gut-brain connection, but this also is incredibly important. I'm not going to spend ages on it because I feel like we have touched on it, but I do just want to emphasize that, you know, stress just ongoing, you know, day to day can hinder into symptoms like this, particularly still even after eating. Remember, it's all about getting that body essentially, get your nervous system into that nice parasympathetic nervous system state so your digestion can work properly. As soon as we are in fight or flight mode, digestion is like, whew, let's like push that to the side. It's not a priority. And what we need to bear in mind is, you know, yes, I said earlier, take some calming breaths, but actually if you are living a very high stress life, you have got poor stress management, and yeah, these are things in your life that are going on but you're not paying attention to, 3 breaths before you eat probably isn't going to cut it. Do you know what I mean? So these are areas, just as a reminder, do not ignore them, okay? I think stress and like the emotional pillar, I think, of our health is always the one that everyone wants to kind of ignore and push to the side. Because also I think a lot of us are in denial. We're like, no, it's not that. It can't be that. It has to be something else. I will just say now, working with, I mean, hundreds of clients at this point, there is nothing stronger than that nervous system pillar of our health, okay? I always say to my clients, particularly when I start working with them, If that is not addressed and you are living in a sympathetic nervous system state, that fight or flight state, healing is not going to happen. As soon as you realize that and really understand that and make the necessary changes to improve your stress management, and when I say like improve your stress management, it's like really truly feel it internally. Like, you know, we can have a bath, like an Epsom salt bath, and be like, oh, I'm de-stressing. But actually you can still be lying in the bath, like with your mind like going like this. Do you know what I mean? We've got to really make sure we're doing the things that are resetting our nervous system and calming ourselves down. When you tap into that, that is when your health will start going through the ceiling, right? In terms of like improvements and results. And that applies to the topic we're talking about today, because as I said, if that digestion is suppressed because we are just in such a strong fight or flight mode and response, then that is basically going to be the biggest hurdle in terms of improving our digestive state. Okay, so I hope there was a few bits of information in there that you maybe learnt something in this video, or maybe something that reminded you to be like, oh yeah, I need to get back to doing that. But I just overall hope that it's been helpful. If there's any questions that you have, leave them down in the comments below, particularly questions for future videos, so in the same style of this one. And yeah, and if you aren't already, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!